Good morning. Party houses during this pandemic aren't just sources of noise and parking issues and trash. In this public health crisis, they're a source of great danger to many of us. Sometimes these party houses involve gatherings of hundreds of people. They're potential super spreader events for COVID-19. Today, given that information, I'm making an announcement about a series of prosecutions tied to party houses. We're filing charges against two hosts whose mega parties we allege have been the source of outrage from neighbors. And we're filing charges against two property owners at whose homes we allege key violations have taken place. So among those charged for violating two things, for violating the Safer LA Health Order and the city's party house ordinance, are TikTok stars Bryce Hall and Blake Gray, who share a home in the Hollywood Hills on Appian Way. We allege these hosts have been incredibly irresponsible, with a highly infectious disease spreading and parties banned because of it, and we allege they violated the law. These parties can be really out-of-control nightclubs. There can be hundreds of people, loud music long into the night, and cars that block the street for emergency vehicles. We allege that in many cases, these parties and the party houses associated with them have hijacked the quality of life for neighbors in the affected communities. And I want to make a very clear point about our allegations against these two party house hosts, Mr. Hall and Mr. Gray. If you have a combined 19 million followers on TikTok in the middle of a public health crisis, you should be modeling great behavior, best practices for all of us, rather than brazenly violating the law and then posting videos about it, as we allege happened here. Let me describe the allegations in a little more detail. We allege that on Saturday night, August 8th of this year, LAPD officers responded to a complaint call about a party in the Hollywood Hills at a home shared by Hall and Gray. We allege that officers arrived at the scene and issued a warning that the parties are prohibited under LA's Safer LA order. And the LAPD officers issued a citation under the party house law. Prominently posted at the scene were two things: notice of violation pertaining to party houses and the initial warning of noncompliance with the city's Safer LA order. And that states that the power can be turned off if there are future violations. The officers stayed until the guests left. 6 days later, on August 14th, we allege that officers were back at the house. They'd received a call of alleged shots fired. They discovered a party with several hundred guests celebrating Mr. Hall's 21st birthday. The officers spoke, we allege, with Mr. Gray, who acknowledged he was aware of the prior citation. He received a separate citation, and LAPD stayed until the guests dispersed. LAPD posted and updated the violation notice about party houses and the final warning of noncompliance with the city's Safer LA order. They didn't find any evidence of a gun. On August 19th, the city shut off the power at this Hollywood Hills home. We also announced today the filing of charges against two homeowners, Juan Wei Bai, who owns a home on Outpost Drive, and David Marvisi, who owns a home on Sunset View Drive. These homes have been the sources of numerous community complaints. Both owners have received multiple citations for violating the city's party house ordinance, and both owners had received a warning letter from our office about potential prosecution. Despite all these contacts, we allege the homes have continued to generate complaints and citations. The penalties in these cases can be up to 1 year in jail and a couple $1,000 fine. I want to thank members of our team who have continued to work diligently on an array of very significant public safety and health issues, including issues relating to party houses in the midst of this pandemic. Arturo Martinez, Ayelet Feynman, Tamar Galatzin, and Ethan Weaver, who is the neighborhood prosecutor for the Hollywood Hills area and is particularly to be commended for his focus on the issues that I'm highlighting today. As always, I want to thank our partners at LA City View, Channel 35, for always being here to enable us to communicate with the public. And I want to thank Arlene Narvaez, who is our translator today, who has to thank herself by signing, which I appreciate, Arlene. So now I'm going to say a few words in Spanish, and then I'm happy to take questions. If you are a member of the press and wish to have a question answered, please direct it to Rob Wilcox, who will then convey those questions to me. Ahora en español. Las casas de fiesta durante esta pandemia no son solo fuentes de ruido, problemas de estacionamiento y basura. Son un problema de salud y seguridad pública. Las casas de fiesta, a veces reuniones de cientos de personas, son posibles eventos de superpropagación del COVID-19. Hoy anunció que mi oficina está presentando cargos criminales contra 2 anfitriones y 2 propietarios cuyas megafiestas han sido fuentes de indignación por parte de los vecinos. Entre los acusados de violar la orden de salud Safer LA Health y la ordenanza de las casas de fiesta de la ciudad, se encuentran las estrellas de TikTok, Bryce Hall y Blake Gray, que comparten una casa en Hollywood Hills. Los anfitriones no solo son increíblemente irresponsables con una enfermedad altamente infecciosa y las fiestas prohibidos debido a eso, alegamos están violando la ley. Now I'm happy, Rob, to take questions, if there are any, from members of the press.
Our first questions come from Fox 11's Phil Schuman.
Great. Hi, Phil.
Is this a deterrent?
I certainly hope it is. I mean, you know, it's one thing to feel as though you can, with impunity, hold parties in the hillsides and elsewhere that are designed to attract hundreds of people and not really care much about whether these are super spreader moments. It's another thing to know that we are going to be vigilant, working with our partners at LAPD and with the communities that are affected, because it isn't just the party house itself that's affected. These individuals who attend your parties could leave and spread them to siblings, to parents, to grandparents, to coworkers, to others in the public. We are very much on the right track, finally, in LA County in driving down the curve. These super spreader parties cannot prevent us from making progress. Everyone's health in our community depends on our remaining vigilant. And so, yes, I'm hopeful this will deter others, because a criminal prosecution, in addition to a citation, could easily follow.
Again, from Phil Schuman, haven't you gone through the same exercise in previous years? What is new or different this time?
Well, for one thing, I think there is heightened awareness by everyone in the communities affected that there will be follow-through. Yes, previously we have been successful in enforcing the city's party house ordinance, but the stakes are much higher this time. Again, the party houses in especially hard-to-get-to places like the Hollywood Hills and elsewhere do threaten public safety no matter when they occur, because they could create traffic problems that make it hard for emergency vehicles to get back and forth. They're incredibly noisy. The noise echoes through the hillsides. There are public safety issues at these locations. All those issues have happened before, and we've addressed those issues. But the stakes are so much higher now, and that means that we are going to be even more vigilant now. And there's one more ingredient. Previously, the power wasn't being shut off at party houses, and now it can be, and prosecutions will ensue.
And from Phil, what have you gotten in terms of convictions and/or penalties on similar charges in the past, and what are these people looking at?
Well, let's take those questions in reverse order. Again, as I mentioned, individuals in the cases that we've charged can face fines of up to $2,000 and up to a year in jail. In the past, we've gotten an array of sanctions imposed. Fines, community service, community labor. It depends on the individual case.
And finally, from Phil, realistically, nobody's going to get jailed for this. If they're willing to risk it, maybe they're willing to pay a fine.
Well, they might be willing to pay a fine. They might be willing to perform community labor on the side of a road someplace. They might be willing to risk the fact that one misdemeanor puts one in much more serious circumstances if they commit another misdemeanor in the future. Maybe people are willing to risk being criminals and having that on their record. I have to say, a party isn't worth those consequences. And especially here, again, it's the consequences to the individual, but we are trying in our nation to recognize that, yes, there are individual consequences to our actions in the middle of this pandemic, but we also owe it to each other to protect each other. And in this case, as I say, when you have up to 19 million followers, what you should be doing is modeling good behavior, driving down the curve, helping society to open again so you can have parties in a safe environment.
From the Los Angeles Times, Dakota Smith. How many similar cases has the LAPD referred to your office in the last month?
Hi, Dakota. I don't know. We can get back to you with regard to whether there are similar cases that have been referred to us, and I'm happy to have us do that during the course of the day today.
From Tim Bulk, reporter at the New York Daily News. My question is, how many parties did Bryce Hall throw in the Hollywood Hills, and what was the nature of those parties?
So I've stated that there were a couple parties at the home at which these guys were renting. One was on August 8th of this year, and one was on August 14th of this year. What I know about the nature of those parties, as I've stated, is this: that at August 8th, officers arrived at the scene following complaints. I don't know how many people attended that event. I believe officers viewed a dozen or 24 people or more leaving the house. They stayed until the house, the party had ended and the house was vacated. On August 14th, officers returned to the home. I believe that was for Mr. Hall's 21st birthday, and observed hundreds of people at that location, and again remained until the party had completely dispersed.
And this is from Steve Gregory, national correspondent for iHeart Media. If the stakes are so high, why are there so many warnings issued? Shouldn't there be a zero-tolerance approach?
So it's a good question. Under the city's law as it exists now, the tools we have are these. We have the ability to, we have the citations and the ability to pursue prosecutions if we believe, even in the first instance, that that's a necessary step to take. With regard to the warnings that are ascribed to the Mayor's Safer at Home ordinance, Safer LA ordinance, you have to recognize that one of the consequences of violating that ordinance now can be the shutting off of power. And so there is a warning issued to assure the property owner is aware of the consequences, because that's a pretty severe consequence to have no power at your home. We'll continue to work with our partners in the mayor's office and on the city council. If the laws need to be toughened, I'm certainly open to doing that, because as I say, the stakes are in fact very high right now. But again, if there are other parties at which officers have to arrive with hundreds of guests, potential super spreader events, our office is going to take that extremely seriously, as these cases indicate.
The Associated Press's Stephanie Dazio. Have any COVID-19 cases been linked to the TikTok house parties? If that turns out to be the case later, could additional charges be filed?
Hi, Stephanie. So at this point, I don't know if there have been any COVID-19 cases linked to these parties. As you know, it could take up to 2 weeks for there to be symptoms that arise having been infected with COVID-19. These parties were on August 8th and August 14th. So this might be around the time when individuals could become symptomatic if, in fact, they were exposed to the disease. At this point, if there were exposures made, we can evaluate whether there are further actions our office can take. I don't know at this point.
Westwood One's Jim Roop. If this continues, would partygoers possibly face citation or other consequences?
At this moment, under the city's rules, partygoers are not going to be getting citations. But again, that could change as well. It depends what kind of behavior we see. I will say that after some of the initial publicity surrounding the potential to shut off power at homes, there was a drop in complaints regarding party houses. At the same time, that drop was not sustained, and complaints are emerging again. So we're going to have to see. Ideally, the announcement of the prosecutions I've stated today will have a further deterrent effect and lead there to be fewer parties so that we don't have to confront these issues in the future. If we do, again, we'll evaluate whether more serious charges and more serious more specific laws with more serious consequences need to be put on the books.
That concludes our questioning for today.
Very good. Thank you very much, those of you who attended this press conference, for being attentive to these issues. They are important. I do hope we get the word out to not only those who host parties and not only the people who own the houses in which those parties take place, but also to party goers that underscore the potential dangers to which you're subjecting yourself and others. This is about the potential consequences, criminal consequences for the hosts and for the owners, but it's another reminder to party goers that it is easily possible that by attending one of these events, you could be jeopardizing the health of loved ones, and you can never take that back. Thank you very much.